Welcome to Behind the Book. It's time now for Behind the Book, hosted by Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion, two authors with a passion for books, no filters, and limitless curiosity. Join them now to find out the real story behind your favorite books and authors. And now, Behind the Book.
Welcome to Behind the Book. I'm here with my co-host Karen. How are you today?
I am fine, thank you. I'm very relieved because I generally live on a quiet street, but for whatever reason, the people two doors down decided to put an in-ground pool into their backyard. And so there's been a lot of heavy equipment. And, when the trucks back up and they do that beep, 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 I can't tell you how annoyed I was because
Yeah.
I'm happy for them, but I'm like, "Excuse me, I'm trying to do a podcast here." But they're done now. So and they don't know what that woman is doing two doors down in her house. So what's new here is my quiet neighborhood is having some activity and I'm
Though
having to adjust.
that makes me think of your book Moonlight Child, because what are the neighbors doing? Is it a pool? Do we know?
For sure. There is some major digging going on in that backyard. We're assuming it's a pool.
One never knows.
Do you ever go for walks at night and, like, see lights on in people's houses? And if you can actually see them, like, as they walk by or they're watching TV and your imagination kinda takes off, and my husband said,
Yeah,
"No, he doesn't really he sees it, but he just is thinking about other things." I'm like, "Oh,
yeah,
no, I
that's
I wonder."
that's probably what my husband would say too, but no, I wonder about everybody. I wish I could see into all the windows, but most of the time people have their curtains drawn because of
No.
people like us, nosy people.
That's right. They don't want us to know.
No. All right. Well, this week we have Pamela Kelley. And when we recorded this, it was her release day for the much anticipated The Hotel. And so she talked a little bit about that, which was fun. And also just how she got into the biz and shared some fun personal stories. So she was a great guest.
I loved hearing how even as successful as she is, she's got a great reader base that just like adores her work. She still sometimes has her doubts and wonders, is this story even working as she's writing it? And I found that as a fellow author, I found that reassuring and interesting too.
Definitely. Yeah, she also talks a little bit about her Achilles heel in writing is just sort of getting started, and I think that's true for so many people. We love to write, and yet we put it off, and I think usually it's just because we're not sure what's coming next maybe, or there's a fear that, "Oh, this book is terrible." I think there's so many things that go on in our little writer heads that
Mhm.
hold us back.
I think Stephen King calls them doubt weasels. The doubt weasels get to you. I also think that if I have 2 or 3 hours, I feel like I need more than that. Like, I feel like I have to have this huge block of time when in fact, that's not true. You could have half an hour and sit down and get some writing done. So I think it's a mind game and that's something Pamela brought up as well.
Oh, definitely. And actually, I just heard this podcast with an author that I can't remember his name. He was talking about sort of the mindset thing, and he has the most amazing story about how he writes anywhere on his phone. So if he's sitting at the dentist waiting for his appointment, he like types up a couple paragraphs in his book on his phone. I'm amazed by that.
I am amazed too. Although I have seen you working on a laptop at the airport. And the story is we had a get together for a group of writers, and my husband tagged along and just enjoyed some downtime by himself while I hung out with the other authors. And we happened to have flights that went out about the same time. So we gave you a lift to the airport and dropped you off at your gate or whatever and went and dropped off our rental car. And later, as we're walking through the airport, he said, "Look, there's Tess Thompson." And you were indeed working on a novel on your laptop. So now, whenever I tell him, "Oh, I didn't get much done today. It was I was distracted, or I had this or that," he says, "I've seen Tess Thompson working at the airport."
Oh, that's so
So
funny.
you
That
get me
makes
in
me
trouble.
that makes me laugh every time you tell me that story. And my family would say, "Yeah, she's working at the airport. That she has a problem. Like, who does that?" So it's all perspective.
Well, Greg and I were impressed.
Oh, that was a fun time. Anyway, well, we should probably stop talking about ourselves and let the listeners enjoy Pamela Kelley. Enjoy the show. Pamela M. Kelley is a USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestselling author of women's fiction, family sagas, and suspense. Readers often describe her books as feel good reads with people you'd want as friends. She lives in a historic seaside town near Cape Cod and just south of Boston. She has always been an avid reader of women's fiction, romance, mysteries, thrillers, and cookbooks. There's also a good chance you might get hungry when you read one of her books, as she is a foodie and occasionally shares a recipe or two. Welcome, Pamela.
Thanks for having me.
We're so thrilled that you agreed to come on today, and especially since it's the release day of The Hotel. So I know it's been a busy day for you and very exciting. So we'd love to know more about your background. Can you tell us how your writing career began and how many books have you written to date?
Sure. I'm going to sound crazy, but I'm not 100% sure how many. I think it's around 40 across a couple of pen names. But I started out writing in college, and I had a part-time job actually doing the obituaries, which was an awesome part-time job. I did every Sunday. And then when I graduated, I worked for the Tampa Tribune, and it was like did community news. But I realized that I didn't really love to do the facts. I like to make things up. So I switched over to my actual major, which was advertising. Moved home and I got a job writing ads and basically selling ad space at radios and newspapers. I did that for years. But then on the side, I joined RWA. I knew I always wanted to write a book, but I just, I sat down. I'll never forget. I sat down when I was in college. I sat in front of an old fashioned typewriter because we didn't have computers then. And I was on a work study job. I sat there and nothing came. I'm like, I don't know anything. Like, I have nothing to write about yet. So it wasn't until probably like a good 20 or so years later that I had some material. And I joined RWA. And yeah, I just started writing on the side. And then it wasn't until probably all my friends were like leapfrogging past me, getting published and book deals. And I'm still, writing like 100 words, 100, 100 pages, getting discouraged and starting something new. So it took me a while. But then I started, it's funny, when I moved, probably about 8 years ago, my next door neighbor was a mystery writer. And she's wonderful. And she just celebrated her 80th birthday, and we're like best friends. But just, I don't know, when I moved in there, it just kind of clicked for me. And I just kind of got serious about it and started publishing sweet romance, writing and publishing sweet romance. And then a couple of years ago, what I always wanted to really write was more like a women's fiction saga with lots of people. And I just kind of needed to work up to that. So that's what I focus on now, with the occasional mystery thrown in.
Oh, fun to write in different genres. So the book you have out today, well, we say today because we're taping today, June 8th, but this won't be airing for a couple weeks. But The Hotel, which is out today, made the Amazon charts list of most highly anticipated books of the summer. And others on the list were a few authors such as Stephen King and E.L. James. That had to be a thrill. Obviously, this is a book that readers are really dying to get their hands on. Can you share how you got the idea for the story and how you went about writing it?
Yeah, so this idea kind of came about actually well over a year ago. I knew I wanted to do this standalone because I had a series set on Nantucket, like a family series, and there's an inn, she turns her house into an Airbnb. And I've been to Nantucket a bunch of times, and there's like this mystique. There's this one hotel there called the Wawanet that it's like you go there and you feel like you've stepped back in time, and it's the Great Gatsby. It's like this gorgeous white hotel. It's on the beach. They're playing croquet. It's just everybody's drinking champagne. It's just beautiful. And I'm like, So kind of the idea just stayed with me. I'm like, I want to do a story with a big cast of characters, like a family where everybody doesn't necessarily get along at a hotel, and just kind of see what happens. And so, but what I did was, so I knew the hotel was named the Whitley, and I started mentioning, in a couple of my books, I think in the restaurant, but also in a couple of my Nantucket series, I had events held at the Whitley. So the readers were starting to be like, they're hearing about this hotel. So it kind of built a little bit of curiosity and anticipation. I just had fun with it.
That's great. So fun. Speaking of Nantucket, it's often used as a setting in your books, and it's also a popular destination for tourists. What do you think the allure is, both for readers and visitors?
Okay, so that's easy. So I grew up on Cape Cod. So people say Cape and the islands, and Cape Cod, it's so touristy. This is prime tourist season right now, and the population just triples, quadruples, and then it's quiet as could be in the winter. And so the Cape is wonderful, but Nantucket has this mystique about it, and Martha's Vineyard too. That's a little bit more affluent. There's a lot of celebrities. The airport at the Nantucket airport is full of private jets from people that have mansions that they only, they might go to. They might go there like 2 weeks out of the summer. Friends of mine live there year round, and we would drive around and just like look at these houses. And my friend Carrie, they've lived there for like 30 years. So she'd be like, oh, yeah, these people, they come for like 2 weeks, they come for a month, they don't rent it out, they don't need the money. It just sits there. It's just like a whole different world. It's just crazy. So, and plus, but it's beautiful over there. And like Nantucket, especially, it's small enough that you don't need to rent a car. You can take a ferry there and you can just walk all around, go to the shops, go to the Whaling Museum. There's a lot to see, a lot to do. And it's just a beautiful, fun place to go in the summer.
I hope to get there someday.
Yeah.
I have to admit that's part of the country I haven't been to yet, but I've explored it through your books, so I want to thank you for that. Besides knowing you as an author, anyone who follows your career knows that you're passionate about helping up and coming authors, both personally, and you've helped me personally, answered a few questions for me here and there, and also through your involvement in the Facebook group 20 Books to 50K. Can you tell us your philosophy, why you feel so strongly about helping other authors and how you go about doing that?
I think it's just kind of like how I've always worked. Like my job before I got into writing was a recruiter. So for 25 years I was helping people get jobs. But with the writing, people helped me, and that's kind of the nature with RWA. It's sharing information, and I think I've always had the philosophy that everybody wins if people share information. I think it's a what is it, a rising tide lifts all the boats or something like that.
Mm.
But it's just fun. I think I love to share information. I love to learn from other people. Like there's Clubhouse. We meet every morning on Clubhouse. And I was just saying to somebody yesterday on Clubhouse, I was having such a hard time. iTunes producer, which has always been fine for me. It's how you upload to Apple. Never had a problem ever. All of a sudden, it decided that it didn't want to upload my new book. Just had no interest whatsoever. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And so somebody on Clubhouse said, well, you can now there's a way that you can just go online, you can upload it directly online. So I did that. And somebody this morning said, oh, you can connect your blog to Amazon, and told me how to do it. And like it took me like 2 minutes to do it. So I think, with social media like Clubhouse and Facebook, the sharing of information is invaluable. When I started out, I learned almost everything on an old forum called Kboards. And because it took me so long to write my first book, I'm faster now. But back then I was, writing on the side. But I always thought I was going to traditionally publish. But then I spent so much time on Kboards, and I had a friend that was traditionally published, and then they said no to one of her books. Everybody said no. And then she went ahead, she got mad. She's like, well, I'm just going to self publish it then. So she did. And now she's like, thank God they said no. But I learned everything on Kboards, just from people sharing information. So I think when you benefit from that information, it's just a natural tendency to want to pay it back.
I was on keyboards too. That's so interesting to hear you say that.
Yeah.
We probably were there at the same time.
Yeah. When Hugh Howey and those
Oh, sure.
people, yeah.
And,
It's like,
I did not as much posting as I did just absorbing all the wisdom from other people.
yeah.
Smart people that were just so generous. And people were happy when other people were successful too. And I see that with you too. You're like really thrilled when someone does well. And I love that.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to see that. It's fun to be like, if you give somebody a tip and then they implement it and it works, it's like, oh, cool, good.
Yeah. Well, you two have both been inspiring to me, both creatively and your smart business sense. So I know that other people have benefited from that as well, from both of you. So, Pamela, tell us, if someone is unfamiliar with your books, what should they read first?
Well, if they like mystery, then I would say probably start with either Trust, which is the first book I ever wrote. That's a mystery, or the one that I just released recently. That's also a women's fiction mystery. They both kind of are, and that's Plymouth Undercover, and that's actually set here in Plymouth, which is a lot of fun to write. But if they like women's fiction, most of my books are women's fiction or sweet romance, and I would say probably start with the Nantucket Inn.
For, the new book set in Plymouth, did you use real locations?
I did. And the funniest thing happened to me. I'm in my office now, and literally right across the street, there's a fairly new pizza place, and the pizza's really good. They have the best gluten-free pizza I've ever had, which most gluten-free pizza is not that good. And I mentioned in the book, and the owner, like someone must have told him, and so he messaged me, and he's like, "Oh, thank you so much." And I'm like, "Oh, no problem. You're welcome." And I ordered pizza the other day, and when I went in there, I picked it up and I paid. The guy looked at me and he goes, "Are you the author?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
It took the pizza to make you famous in your own
The
hometown.
pizza, exactly, exactly.
So when you start a book, what is your writing process exactly? Do you outline or do you just kind of they call it discovery writing when you just do it as you go
Yeah.
along?
So I'm a discovery writer, but I have a weird process where like I can't finish a book, turn around and start writing a book the next day. Just I wish I could. It doesn't work for me. I usually take a couple weeks off in between books where I just think about the book and stress about not writing. But I think about the book a lot. And then I'll jot down like anything that I think I know about the book. Like I usually start with what's my situation? What's the main conflict? What do these people want? But I don't really know more than that. Like I've tried to outline. The one time I actually outlined a book, it was ridiculous. The outline ended up 19,000 words because the only way I could outline the book was to feel my way through it, kind of like I feel my way through writing a book. So I discover so much of it as I go along. I do use something that's kind of cool though. I outline as I go along after I write. So after I write a scene, I use a remarkable tablet, which is just like a fun little, I don't know why it works better for me than just a basic notepad, but I like it and it's just easy to kind of keep track of everything. It's like an etch a sketch that you write on, but I'll just write the scene and I'll write whose point of view it was. And then that just helps me kind of like I'll glance at it, I'll be like, okay, so and so hasn't had a scene for a while. Maybe they're up next, so kind of informal, but that's basically kind of how I do it. And the first half of the book is painfully slow for me because I don't really know the story yet. I'm kind of figuring out as I go. But then by the second half, usually things click, and all of a sudden I pick up my pace is much faster.
I find that to be the case too. Once you know the characters and the situation, it builds momentum, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely.
So, what parts of writing fiction are the easiest for you, and what are the hardest?
I'd say the easiest is probably that, like I said, that second half of the book. I like the writing itself. The hardest part for me is going to sound ridiculous, but the hardest part for me is getting started. A perfect day is if I get up and I sit down. I get up really early, so it's ridiculous that I don't do this every day. But I'm usually up between like 5 and 5:30. And in a perfect world, if I sat down and I did my writing then, I would. It's wonderful. The times that I do that, it's like I have the most productive day. But I just don't always do that. So that's just for me. It's just the hardest part is just getting started.
Speaking of Clubhouse, I heard somebody sharing the other day in there over the weekend at the conference that that is also their hardest part, getting started. And she made this deal with her husband. He said, all you have to do is write 50 words when you first get up in the morning. And through the exercise of writing those 50 words, then boom, she's in it. So I just was like, that is really interesting because I also have trouble starting sometimes. I'll
Oh, I like
procrastinate for an
that.
hour. Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I should try that because I'm just like, oh, I'm just going to get my coffee and I'm going to get on Facebook. I'm going to look at email, and then all of a sudden, 2 hours have gone by. And I'm like, oh, it's time to get on Clubhouse.
I think too, it's a little bit like exercising. If you say you're going to work out, once you do it, you keep doing it. If you say I'm going to do it for 15 minutes, you just continue because you're already in it. And then later you feel great and think, I should do this all the time, you
Yeah,
know?
that's so true. One thing that helped though was during the first half of the book, which was harder. Plus, I wasn't feeling great then, so that I'm not feeling well. That makes it hard to write too. But the Clubhouse writing sprints were amazing for me for the first half of the book. When I need that little push to just get something down, because there's usually always several of them going on, usually between like 11 a.m. Eastern to like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There's always at least one or two going on, and you can just jump in there. And usually there are people write for 20 minutes and then they check in and people just go around. Usually there's usually not more than 5 or 10 people, but they'll just check in quickly, be like, oh, how'd you do? And sometimes people say, oh, I did so many words, or oh, I just edited, or whatever they did. It's just kind of nice to have a little bit of accountability. And the days that I would do that, like my word counts, nothing. Like some people be like, oh, I did 1,000 words. And I'm like, oh, how'd you do that in 20 minutes? I'm like, if I get 200 or 300, I'm happy, but because I'm just getting words down. But I found that really, really helpful.
Now, for those that don't know what Clubhouse is, do you mind explaining?
So Clubhouse is something I thought was nuts. I didn't think I was going to like it at all. It's a new social network that is just on your phone and it's audio. It's kind of like little rooms on your phone that you can go into and you lurk on them and you listen and then you can be invited up to speak. There's usually like one or two speakers in the room and it's usually a specific topic. But it's almost like attending a little mini writers conference, I found. And you can, you have to kind of, there's some crazy rooms. So you need to pick the rooms that are going to add value to you. But it can be addicting. It's not, I didn't think I would like it. And then I was surprised by how much I do like it because it's not video. I find video a little bit intimidating with, usually when I'm on Clubhouse, I'm in my pajamas. I look a mess. Nobody knows.
Exactly.
So this ties into what we were talking to about before with getting started. On those days when you're not feeling the muse, what do you do?
Sometimes I don't write. Sometimes I do other things. Or if I'm really not feeling it, but I need to write, then I'll read something. I'll either read a craft book, just a little bit. I'll read like a chapter, or I'll pick up a book that the writing really inspires me. Usually it intimidates me at the same time when that happens if I'm having a hard time getting into the writing, but it usually makes me want to, somehow it seems to unlock something. And then I can sit down and I make a bargain with myself. Okay, you're not feeling it today. Just, like you said, write 50 words, write a page, write something. And if it's horrible, you can just rip it up. And usually it ends up just usually you get into it and then something comes and it's usually not that bad.
I like that, make a bargain with yourself. I
Yeah.
do that so many times.
Do you ever have any doubts about a book, either while you're writing it or as you're finishing?
Oh, every single book, all the time. Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. I didn't know that that was normal and that most writers feel that. It took me, this is way back when I was aiming for traditional publishing and I was aiming for books back then were like 100,000 words, 90 to 100,000 words was like the average. So that's about a 400-page book. And I think it was 5 or 6 books that I wrote 100 pages and abandoned every single book because I'd have this great shiny idea. And then when I'd get at the 100-page mark, there's like this little voice that was like, what were you thinking? This is awful, but this is other idea. Why don't you come play with this idea? And I just kept doing it. I didn't know, it came up, the topic came up. And I'm like, oh, you mean that happens to you too? And they're like, you have to keep going. You need to just finish it. Even if you think it's the worst thing ever, you need to finish it because then you can go back and fix it. And just the process of finishing a book was so worthwhile because, yeah, no book is perfect. There's lots that needs to be fixed, but it's not ever as bad as you think it's going to be.
So how do you know when it's done then? I know I could just endlessly tweak and rewrite, and at what point do you say I'm finished?
I edit as I go, so that helps. I edit as I go, like every day. Before I write, I go back and I read over what I wrote the day before, or I tweak. So I'm constantly tweaking the whole way through. And then I go back at the end and I go through the whole thing again and I tweak. Usually by the time I get to the end, like if there's a problem in a book, then I don't finish. I keep revising until I get to the end. So I'm not usually surprised. Like I haven't gotten to the point where I finished a book and I've been like, oh my God, I can't do anything with this. Usually I manage to work out the problems before I finish. So by the time I finish and I go for that final pass, I basically just had to tell myself because You do, you worry about that. But I finally just said, you know what? This is as good as I'm capable of making it, and I have to let it go.
That's
That
really
happens
good.
with every book.
Every single one, right?
Some more than others, yeah, but yeah, pretty much, to varying degrees. And there's no rhyme or reason to it because sometimes the books that I have the most doubt about are the ones that do the best. So you just don't know. It's hard to judge your own stuff accurately.
Yeah, I agree. I say every time about halfway through a book, it's the worst thing I've ever written, and always at the end. And Cliff's like, "Yeah, I think you said this last time," and it was fine.
Yeah, well, I always send my books to my sister. My first readers are my sister and my niece. And my sister just laughs. She goes, I go, Jane, are you sure this is okay? Like, are you sure? You sure it's okay? And she goes, would you stop it? She goes, I really liked it. Will you ever believe me when I tell you that? And she goes, you say this in every single book. I'm like, I know, sorry.
Well, speaking of beta readers or readers that you trust with the first draft, do you have an ideal reader in mind while you're writing? Like, for example, Stephen King always says he writes for his wife.
I write for me and my sister because we like the same things. Like we pass books back and forth. So, but I go by like I just try to write for what I like, and I just kind of try to just please myself, and then hope that other people will like it too.
That's worked for you so far. So,
Knock on wood.
do you have a favorite writing space? You said that you're in your office right now. Is that where you do most of your writing?
It is now. Yeah, it didn't used to be. The office is new. This office is new to me, so I've only been here for about 2 months. But I wrote pretty much all of the hotel in this office.
So
Yeah,
it's separate from your house? You're in a separate office?
I am. Yeah,
Oh, nice.
I'm on Main Street, so I'm sitting right now. It's a really old building, so it was built in 1900, and it has really high ceilings, and it's got fireplaces. It's got a lot of character. So I'm sitting in front of this window now, overlooking Main Street. I like to look at stuff, even though I don't get distracted, but I like music on, and I like to I'm nosy, so I like to look out the window and see cars go by and see. There's usually a lot of foot traffic. And I was here. This is hysterical, but I was here on the weekend that I was finishing up the book. It was pouring Memorial Day weekend. It was pouring all weekend, so there wasn't a lot of foot traffic. But two guys went running by, jogging by, and I did a double take. One of them was wearing a red Santa hat. I'm like, okay, that gives me something to look at.
And to
Oh,
put in a book later if you want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Besides your sister and your niece, do other family members read your books?
So this is kind of funny. So my dad and my brother keep asking, and I keep telling them because I mean they're guys. I'm like, you guys, when I write something that I think you're gonna like, I'll tell you. I'm like, I just don't think you're gonna love my women's fiction. I love the fact that you want to read my books, but I'll let you know when I write something I think you might like. So I told my brother, I'm like, you should check out Trust. Maybe you might like that, or the new Plymouth Mystery. My dad maybe might like that one too, but yeah, but I don't push my books on family. If they want to read them, they can read them.
this ties into what we were talking about before with you helping up and coming authors. Do you have advice in general for aspiring writers?
Probably the best advice I would have is to read a lot and then to write what you love to read. 'Cause if your books do take off, they're going to want you to write a lot more of that kind of book. So it helps if you like writing it and reading it. And I think it makes a difference too. I think the market is so competitive right now. Like sometimes I hear like guys sometimes saying, "Oh, romance is so easy. I should write a romance." And I'm just like, feel like saying, write what you like to read because, if you don't understand the nuances of romance, it's going to be hard to compete against women that love it and have been reading it and writing it for years. Because I honestly think you can do well in any genre at all, whether it's science fiction, historical, mystery, whatever. You can do equally well in almost any genre if that's what you're passionate about.
Yeah, I agree. What kind of books do you enjoy reading, at least lately? Are any favorites that have stood out?
Yeah, I'm a big Danielle Steele fan. I,
Mm.
I read most of her books. I'm reading a historical one now that's wonderful. I think it's Kate Atkins. It's The Rose Code, and it's set during World War II about three women that were recruited to be female basically spies and code breakers. So that's really good. Yeah, I just have a stack of like I have a book buying problem, so I just have so many books that I need to get to.
Do you prefer to read in paperback or print?
You know what? I don't. I'm really shallow, and I'll sometimes buy a hardcover if the cover's pretty because I want it on my bookshelf. But I usually read. I usually read on my phone. I have two Kindles that I don't use, and I'll sometimes read on my laptop, but I usually read on my phone as I walk around or in bed or whatever.
So what's the most gratifying part of being an author for you?
This has just always been my dream job, and what's gratifying is I get to do this full time, and support myself, which is for me, that was the dream. So I'm just grateful I get to do that.
Who has been your biggest supporter as you built your career?
Oh gosh, so many people. I've been lucky because people have always been really supportive from teachers in high school and college. My family's always been really supportive. My grandfather, who I never even realized it, but he was a writer and he was a little poet, and we didn't find this out until he was in his 90s. And so he's in a lot of my books. There's so much material there that he pops up in a lot of my books. But yeah, my family, friends, people that I've met. There's been a core group of us that met years ago. Kind of we're all at the same level, and so, we've been great friends ever since, supporting each other. And so I think that's a lot of fun. I've met other people through like some of the conferences, and we've become good friends. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, I think, to have a bunch of author friends to chat business with.
I love that too. I love talking shop and talking the creative process. So have you ever had somebody say something discouraging or negative that made you want to succeed even more?
Oh gosh. No. I mean, I've had plenty of discouraging things. Like, my first one-star review, I cried and I couldn't
Oh,
write for the rest of the day because it's funny how when you're a new writer and you get that first one-star review, even if you might have dozens of good reviews, for some reason that one bad review seems to carry so much weight. And then you're like, oh my God, what was I thinking? And then of course, you get over it and then you're like, okay, I got it out of my system. There's gonna be more, I'll deal with it. But I think a lot of it in this business is mindset. And I've just always stayed super focused on just writing what I want to write and being, probably the one thing that's influenced me more than anything else is a book I read, The Power of Positive Thinking. It sounds goofy as could be, but I think it makes a difference. I just expect to do well. So I just do everything I can to make sure that I'm doing the best job that I can do and just I try to improve with every book. And that includes the marketing and everything that goes along with it. I find the marketing side of things super fun. So, the whole job to me, the writing and the marketing, it's fun. So, that makes it easier.
I agree
Yeah,
about that, the business half versus the writing half. I love both of them. Often said I wish I could be twins. So I could one person could do the writing, the other person could do the marketing and the business end.
your background in advertising and marketing was really the perfect fit for your author career.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and even it's funny because my last job where I was placing people, I was placing marketing people.
Mm.
So I was always I had to market my own business. So I think that helped, having that understanding of like how powerful advertising and marketing can be because it's made a big difference for me. And I like to
Absolutely.
keep experimenting and trying new things too.
What is your why when it comes to your fiction? Like, what are you hoping readers take away from your books?
So it's funny, I figured this out probably about 2 years ago. And I think it's part of somebody's, we talk a lot about branding and what makes what is somebody's brand. And, I never really thought much about branding, but it kind of clicked for me about 2 years ago when my book started doing well. I think for me, it's that you meet your readers' expectations, the experience that they get from your book, whatever that is. And for me, and I actually think I found this in a lot of the reviews when I was looking at my reviews, and there were some things that popped up, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. The one common thing that came up a lot was the characters feel like friends. And my sister said to me, she goes, yeah, she goes, because you're writing about really tight knit friend groups or tight knit siblings. And I think, especially in these times where things are so uncertain, it's a happy place for people to go to and to return to. And, that makes me happy, but that's my why for the books is, having that kind of an experience.
So what are you working on right now or what's coming up next for you?
I have 3 things I'm working on, actually. I'm working on the next mystery, which I have to start. I'm in the thinking stage about that one. So I haven't actually started writing on it. I actually have a lot of things in the works. I have a serial killer mystery that I'm about a quarter of the way through. That's going to be under a different pen name because that's a little bit darker. And then I have Nantucket News, which is book 7 in the Nantucket series, and that's the one that I'm actually going to start writing. I have a historical that is about a quarter of the way through. So the historical and the Nantucket book are the 2 that I'm going to start focusing hard on next week. So those are the main ones.
Do you write 2 at once?
I didn't used to, but I do now. And interestingly, I did this experiment where I was just not feeling good and I had a lot of problems with deadline stress. And so to try to get my mind, and I don't do pre-orders anymore until the book is done. So that's been a huge change for me because I personally just can't handle it. So I just for fun, and I had this idea that I had wanted to work on for the mystery. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to try this experiment. I'm just going to write that book on Sunday. So every Sunday, I wrote a couple chapters and I involved my readers. And I said, you guys, I'm doing this experiment. If you're interested, I can send you some chapters on Sunday. And they got really into it. They're like, so they looked forward to their Sunday chapters. I had about 200 readers that every Sunday they read however many chapters I wrote. And usually it was anywhere between 1,000 and 4,000 words, just depending. So it took me about 4 months. I only wrote that book on Sundays. And so about 4 months later, I had the book finished. And it was such a fun, I just had pure fun doing that book. And I looked forward to Sundays when I had my little play project. But that was kind of like, I think I just might keep doing that.
That is really brave of you. I don't know if I could send work out in progress because so often I go back and add things in or take things out. You didn't have that issue at all?
Oh no, I did. I did.
Oh.
I did. Like I said, I tweak as I go. So what I sent to them on Sunday had already been written and rewritten and gone over and tweaked. And then still at the end, I still went back through and I tweaked a few things because at one point, actually, it was funny. At one point, sort of about 3/4 of the way through, because all along, some of them like, oh, I think so and so might be the killer, or so and so is. And then about 3/4 of the way, like 7 or 8 of them were like, I think so and so is a killer. I'm like, well, that is the killer. Okay. So I'm like, okay, I need to shift gears and make somebody else the killer. So, and that was a lot of fun too. So that resulted in a lot of comments where people were like, and there was a twist at the end, and I'm like, there was okay.
I had always heard that with mysteries, you had to plot them out, but that isn't the case with you.
No, I never have with mysteries. The way I approach mysteries, and I did this with trust too, is I feel my way through them and I kind of want to basically play around and investigate and make a few different people potentially look guilty. Like when I wrote Trust, I had 3 or 4 main people that could have done it. And I didn't decide myself until I was at the end. I'm like, okay, who's it going to be? Because any of them could have done it. So that was
Yeah,
a lot of fun. It makes it
that
more fun for me when I don't know what's going to happen.
yeah, that's the same for me with my mysteries. But I have had a couple moments of panic about 3/4 through, like, wow, I actually don't know who did this. And I now what if I can't figure it out? You know what I mean?
But then you do, right? You
Yeah.
always do. It's like
Yeah.
your brain is working on it and you always come up with something. Well, we, have this little thing we do at the end of Behind the Book. We have 10 fun extra questions that don't have anything to do with writing, and we just rapid fire ask you and have you just say the first thing that comes to mind. So
Okay.
you're up for
Yeah,
this?
sure.
Okay. The first one, what is one food that will never get past your lips?
Oh, egg salad.
Oh, interesting. Who would you want to play you in a movie?
Oh gosh. I have no idea. I really truly have no idea. Maybe Monica from Friends? I don't know.
Mm.
Oh, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, she'd be
Yeah,
good, actually. Yeah.
I've
excellent.
been binge watching Friends lately, so that just came to mind.
It's on your mind.
Yeah.
What superpower would you pick given the opportunity?
Oh, maybe to be invisible.
At the end of your life, what do you hope you'll have accomplished?
Just to have enjoyed my life, been a good person, healthy, good relationships.
What is the worst job you've ever had?
Chambermaid at a hotel. I would have nightmares about chasing hares around a bathtub. It was awful.
How long did you do that?
I was 14. That was like one of my first summer jobs. I did that for a year or two in the summer. The money was good.
I
If you
did
could,
that too. That's funny.
I've never done that, but I don't think I've missed out that much.
No, you have not.
If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
Oh, I'd love to be a hacker. I think that would be really interesting.
We haven't had that answer yet. That's a good one. What's your favorite smell?
Vanilla.
What is the most terrifying thing you've ever done?
Most terrifying thing I've ever done. Oh, so I could never do this now, but somehow when I think I was 19, my college roommate, one of my college roommates, her brother was, I think it was the Navy, but he flew planes. And so he had come home for the weekend and he took me up in this little bitty plane. And initially they said that it was too windy, so he wasn't going to do any stunts. I'm like, okay. So we're just like floating around, and this was in Lakeland, Florida. So we're like, flying over the lakes. It's nice and clear, and the winds calm down. And he said, "The winds are good now. How do you feel about doing some rolls?" I'm like, "Okay." So we did barrel rolls, loop to loops, and the way that you go all the way up and the plane stalls out and then it comes down. That's how that works. And I wasn't scared because he knew what he was doing, but now I'm terrified of flying, so to me, that I can't believe I did that.
So you were braver when you were younger and didn't know any better.
Yeah, much. Now I'm afraid of everything.
When people pronounce words incorrectly, do you let them know?
Um, if they ask me, I would let them know, but I wouldn't correct somebody otherwise.
If you could live your life over again, would you want to?
Oh, absolutely.
That sounds like someone who had a good run so far.
Exactly.
I mean, why not? Keep going.
Well, I think that's it for today. Thank you, Pamela, for joining us. We love talking with you.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is fun.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Book, brought to you by authors Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and post a question in the comments section. This has been Behind the Book.